This response has been a long time coming, but honestly, I'm glad I took my time with it. Not least of all because I wanted to be mature and I wanted to process my emotions because I didn't want to come at this angry and I didn't want to be speaking out of hurt or pain or anything like that. For context, some of you may know I used to co-host a podcast called Two Women Talking over on Liana Kersner's channel, but in the beginning of October, Liana posted a video saying that I had lied to her for 16 months. And she talked about a situation where we had worked on making an audiobook for Calidus Chronicles Volume 1, and how I told her that my boyfriend had been the one who told me to put a stop to the project because he didn't like her performance as one of the characters, when in reality, I was the one who didn't want to move forward because I wasn't happy with how the recordings we did came out. And I will get into more detail about all this in a minute, but I just want to give context. Then she talked about a situation with my boyfriend that happened on Discord where she didn't like something he had said, and how that led to an argument between her and I. I will be including screenshots of some of our conversations, which they will be censored to cover up some names and private details. And I went back and forth for a while on whether or not I should include screenshots, but I decided once I had censored names and everything that yes, it was important to do so. And so I spent 6 weeks or so thinking about how to apologize and how to acknowledge my mistakes while also defending myself against what, quite frankly, felt like a hit piece. See, the funny thing is, the other night, while I was going through the screenshots that I have of our conversations, trying to put together my response, I came to a realization. And that's the fact that she says I lied to her for 16 months, that my boyfriend was the one who put a stop to the audio project we were doing, but I never actually said that he did. He did say that the character she was voicing in the audiobook didn't sound like the character, it sounded like her. An important piece of context for this situation is the fact that he created that character. Calidus Chronicles has never been a solo effort. It's a project that my boyfriend and I have been working together on for more than 8 years at this point. And some of the characters in the story were ones that my boyfriend created before he and I even met. Now, we've worked on the development together. There are some characters that I've had more control over as we've developed them over the years, but this character in particular was not one of those. This is very much one that my boyfriend has a heavy hand in because it's one of his favorites. So, yes, if my boyfriend isn't happy with how this character is portrayed, even if he tells me, yeah, go ahead with the audiobook because it's better to have something than to not, that's not good enough for me. And you know what? Even when she and I talked about it, I didn't come right out and say that I didn't like what we had recorded. And part of that is my fault because I did not know how to direct a recording session. I also just didn't know how to express myself, period, which is a drawback that runs through this entire situation because both here and in my last argument with Liana, I didn't know how to express the way I was feeling and the way I was looking at things, and I think it led to a lot of misunderstanding. I didn't have the vocabulary or the experience to express this is how I want something to be read or this is how I want something to sound. And so the time we spent on that recording was extremely frustrating for me because I was feeling my own limitations. And that's part of why I wasn't happy with it. I wasn't brave enough because I was scared of being rejected if I came out and said that I didn't like it. And in Liana's video, she said there was no reason for me to be scared. It wasn't about there being a reason. It was about a fear of rejection. It was about a fear of making her angry because, I live in a house where if I make an authority figure angry, I end up in a lot of trouble. And she knows that. She knows I come from an abusive home, and because she didn't mention that in her video as context for why I might be afraid to rock the boat, It's something I now have to say. It's something that's probably not too surprising because people who watch my videos have probably noticed I have a very unstable home life. But also, yeah, it's not great that this is how I have to reveal this to people. And I will absolutely acknowledge that I handled this whole situation extremely poorly when it came to the subject of the audiobook. Like I said, I was too scared to upset her that I didn't come right out and say that I wasn't happy with the project. But also, like, at the time, she picked up on that. She called me out for not just saying that I didn't like the recording when she could tell that's what I was trying to say between the lines. And here's the thing. In that conversation, looking back at those screenshots, is the way she turned on my boyfriend so fast. And again, I want to point out that what he said was that it sounded like her, not the character. And you know what? The fact she was sick when this recording happened, I apologized to her at the time. I apologized for not considering. But I do also want to point out, I've never worked with voice actors. I've never been involved in a project like that. And it was also, as much as I wanted the audiobook to happen, because, you know, that's one of the things as an author. You put out a book, the idea of having an audiobook, that's a goal. That's something that, yeah, I wanted to make happen. And here's the thing, when it comes to publishing Calidus Chronicles, I make no secret that I am making up the whole process as I go along. And that's one thing that works well enough when it's just me and my boyfriend and I say, oh, I'd like to do this, or I'm thinking about doing this, but then I step back and I take weeks to think about it, or I go back and forth. When it's just me or it's just the two of us, that's one thing. That doesn't work when you bring in a team of people. And, you know, that was my problem. I was not prepared to be working with a team of people. The other thing is that Liana was the one assembling this team. She was talking to the voice actors and making the arrangements. So I felt disconnected. And you know what? That's a me problem. I was not prepared to get into something that was so professional and that involved other people. And I'm sorry for that. I'm sorry that I took advantage of people's work through my ignorance. That's what frustrates me so much, is that Liana's whole video, it makes everything I did malicious. It makes it look like everything was done on purpose and I was deliberately trying to manipulate and lead her on, and that was never the case. But again, I also never told her that my boyfriend was the one who wanted to put a stop to the project. I may not have been able to come out and straight up say I didn't want to do it, but I never said straight up that my boyfriend did either. But I also saw how quickly she turned on him after that, and the way she started saying that, well, because his name wasn't on the cover, he didn't get to have a say in the project, he just got to give an opinion, which the whole thing was that he gave an opinion, and then I wanted to respect his opinion because this is a project we do as a partnership. He never tried to have a say, I just tried to respect his opinion. And my biggest mistake and my biggest regret in this whole thing is that when she started bad-mouthing my boyfriend and saying he didn't get a say, I didn't stand up for him and his involvement, which I should have. I went along, and when she said, oh, well, you have important things to say for women, and he has to respect your decision, and he's not criticizing my voice acting, he's criticizing your choice, that was not what happened. That is not what the situation was, and I should have put my foot down then. And the way she started to say that his contributions to the story were, well, the word she used was fanfic. And after that, it became very clear that she had a grudge against my boyfriend. And the way she would talk about him in private was extremely insulting and extremely cruel. And when situations came up where he was having a difficult time and I would mention it to her, because here's the other thing. my relationship with Liana was extremely blurred. By that, I mean, she was my co-host, she was my mentor. A couple times she said she was my manager without us ever really talking about what that meant or what that looked like. She was also someone I looked up to because I had been a fan of her videos before we started talking. I also considered her my counselor through her Liana Care sessions. You know, she was my peer counselor and life coach. So when things came up and things got difficult, she was the one I would turn to. And that was why I told her the comment he had made about it sounding like her, not the character. I wasn't trying to talk to Liana, the actor who was working for me. I was trying to talk to Liana, my counselor. And yes, looking back, I do realize how stupid and naive it was to think that it could work that way, which is exactly why they say you shouldn't be friends with your therapist or counselor. And I didn't want to upset her, of course. Like I said, I was afraid of rejection. The other thing is because most of my book sales came from her telling people on her channel to buy the book, I was aware that if she got angry at me or if I wasn't on her channel anymore, I would lose that platform. Which, you know what, maybe that's a bad way to look at things. And maybe I was being self-serving and I was trying to take advantage. And I'm sorry if I was. But that's the thing. Her whole thing of being angry at me and our 3-day argument where she started telling me that it was pretty clear I didn't know when I was lying. And it wasn't that I wouldn't come clean, it's that I couldn't. And I am going to include screenshots of our last argument because, honestly, I want people to see what happened in that conversation. Because, you know what? I have spent years with my mother telling me that I'm a liar and I'm a manipulator and I take advantage of people and that I'm a sinner, essentially, because, you know, I come from a very religious home. And Liana knows that. And before all this started going down, even in one of my previous videos, I talked about how I came to the revelation that I had been standing still in my own life because I had been waiting for someone to save me. So I was taking a step back and I was realizing that I had made mistakes in my life and I was trying to take assessment. So because of that, when this whole thing happened and Liana started telling me I had lied to her, I didn't disagree because the other thing, a week before this, my mom saw me drawing something NSFW and said she no longer saw me as her daughter and she was done with me. So this is what was going on in my real life at the same time that this whole thing with Liana was going down. And she knew this was going on. And yet she still decided that this was the time to argue with me. This was the time to accuse me of trying to stonewall her and punish her with silence when I'm at the point where I have to figure out where I'm going to live and what I'm going to do. And I can appreciate that she was under a lot of stress as well at the time, but that is not an excuse to come in and start making these accusations against me when I'm going through things as well. So let me back up for a second. So like I said, at the beginning of October, my relationship with my mom pretty much fell apart. You know, straw that broke the camel's back, things just couldn't be sustained anymore. And again, this is something I was not ready to talk about online, but in order to address everything that went down with Liana, I have to talk about it because I can't address why I handled things the way I did without the context that my real life was completely breaking down. Now, my relationship with my mom has been falling apart for years, and it has been steadily getting worse, which Liana knew. So initially I'd been told I was going to have to move out at the end of our current lease in the spring. And Liana had said that if worse came to worse and if I really had to get out of here, I could go stay with her. My boyfriend and I are long distance and he's not in a position where I can just move down there to be with him. So that just isn't an option right now. So yes, I did cling to the idea that, you know, I would be able to go stay with Liana for a while. And when I had the argument with my mom and things fell out, I reached out to Liana and I said, look, can we make this happen by the end of the year instead? Because I can't handle living here. And she said no. To be fair, I understand why she said no, because I didn't have a lot of money. I didn't have any prospects. I wouldn't have been able to work in Canada. So I understand why she said no. And she told me at the time, song You Coming Here was supposed to be break glass in case of emergency, not a plan A. Personally, I felt like I was at the break glass in case of emergency, but after she said that, I knew she was right. I knew that it wasn't practical for me to go there when I didn't have money. I wouldn't be able to make money. So I stepped back and I didn't message her for a few days because I was embarrassed. I was embarrassed that I had tried to rush into something and that I had taken it for granted that this is something I would be able to do. And I also know that this was like right after she had to start refunding her Kickstarter backers. So I get money was tight for her as well. But yes, I went quiet for a few days, which I tend to do when I'm stressed out, and she knows that. But I did eventually reach out and say, hey, I wasn't trying to punish you. It was nothing like that. I was just trying to get things together. And I thought we came to an agreement because, she said we just need to make sure we can do this in a way that's financially responsible. And I was like, okay, you know what? That makes sense. And then the whole thing on the Discord blew up where we were talking about the edited Wicked poster with Cynthia Erivo claiming that it was the most offensive thing she'd ever seen, that fans had covered her eyes with her hat to make the poster look more like the Broadway playbill. And my boyfriend made the comment that her response was painting a target on her back. And this was coming from the perspective that when you reveal a weakness to bullies and trolls, that's when they tend to pounce on that. And because they see a reaction, they'll keep attacking that same thing to try and get more of a reaction. It was not meant to be victim blaming. It was not saying it was her fault, just that she had created an opening that people would try to take advantage of. And Liana talks about how they've established language like that is not allowed in the Discord. Problem is those conversations happened in other channels that my boyfriend was not in, so I'm not sure how he was supposed to know that. And so instead of explaining it to him, she said, "You've taken swipes at my voice acting before, so you should be careful." My boyfriend asked me to reach out to her because Liana and my boyfriend have never actually had a conversation. So he asked me to reach out to her to explain where he had been coming from, just to explain his perspective so she would know he wasn't trying to victim blame, he wasn't trying to attack Cynthia Erivo, he was just trying to make a point about how trolls respond to things like that. The message I sent her was, I said I didn't think her comment to him had been fair. Her response to me made it pretty clear she didn't want to have a discussion. And then she posted something else on Discord, and my boyfriend tried to explain himself and to clarify what he had meant, but she told him it was a mod call. And she said it in a way that read like she was telling him to shut up. I'm sorry I don't have screenshots for this. I wish I did. But the simple fact is, from where I was watching it, because I knew all the things she had said about my boyfriend in private before, saying he was in her ship books, saying he wasn't good enough for me, criticizing his contribution to the story that he and I create, and saying he doesn't get to have a say in it, or that he's not a good partner for me, because I knew all those things, it looked like a personal attack when she called him out like that. And when she accused him of taking swipes at her voice acting, which again, the comment was, it sounded like her, not the character, which is not a comment on her voice acting, just that she wasn't a good fit for the role. And I knew she wasn't a good fit for the role. I knew she shouldn't have been doing the voice, but I wanted the project to happen. So I tried to ignore my gut, but then when the recordings happened, I knew it wasn't going to work. It wasn't something I wanted to put my name on. It wasn't something that I wanted to represent my project, and I should have just said that. Problem is, I was a coward, and I tried to appease people, and I couldn't just say it, because I didn't want to rock the boat. Well, here we are. The boat is not just rocked, the boat is gone. So it was pretty clear she did not want to have a conversation about this. My boyfriend left the Discord because he said it was pretty clear she didn't want him there, so he left. I was thinking about leaving too, and he told me to stay because he respected my friendship with Liana, but I also wasn't sure I wanted to be friends with someone who treated my boyfriend like that. But I had thought that maybe if we both had time to calm down and we came back to it in a few days, maybe we'd be able to talk it through. And then she came at me, and that's when she accused me of stonewalling her and punishing her with silence and going off about how my boyfriend is a bad influence on me, and again, that he's not good enough for me, and saying that I can't expect my friends not to set boundaries with my partner. And this is where I should have said that it didn't look like she was setting a boundary. It looked like she was being a bully. And that's what bothers me. Because, for the past few weeks, I was like, maybe I was wrong. Maybe she had a point. It's her Discord. She has a right to set a boundary. But that's the thing. It doesn't look like a boundary. It doesn't feel like a boundary. It felt like a personal attack, and it felt like she was taking a swipe at him because she didn't like him. That's not setting a boundary. And that's when I made it clear that he was not the one who had stopped the audiobook project. That was me. And that's when she said that me saying her comment wasn't fair was me gaslighting her. Here's the thing. Even if he had been the one to put a stop to the audiobook project, how did that justify the way she was treating him and the way she had been treating him for the past 16 months? I can understand why she says it was embarrassing that she put the project together and then someone else put a stop to it. And I can see why she would say that that's embarrassing to her in front of the people who she had recruited to it. But no, I don't think that justifies the grudge she clearly held against him for 18 months. And this is when everything dissolved into me being the problem and me being a bad person. It wasn't just, there was no possibility that I had just made a mistake. No, suddenly I was scum. That's, when I showed the screenshots of our argument and the statement I had initially written to someone who is familiar with me and with Liana's work, he said, she wants you to look like scum while she just looks like the innocent victim. And yeah, the more I look at it, the more that's how it feels. Because I apologized, I acknowledged I had made a mistake. I even tried to say, hey, I understand what the flaw in me is that caused this, and this is something that I've already started working on. But when I did that, my words were twisted. Because when I said, I've expected people to help me, and that's a problem, she twisted it into, are you saying no one has made your life easier, when that was never what I said? Like I said, I apologized, I acknowledged a mistake, I owned up to the flaws in myself, but she kept saying, well, if you really understood, you would be saying more. I don't really know what more she wanted me to say beyond I'm sorry. And finally she asked, well, what are you going to do to fix this? And my response was, I don't know right now. But less than an hour after that, she said, okay, here's what you're gonna do. You're going to make a statement for approval and distribution. And I agreed to that. And I wrote a statement that she said in her video was a rough draft, which it was not. I've never written a public statement before, so I'm sorry if it wasn't good enough. But I acknowledged that I had been dishonest, which, looking back, I wasn't as dishonest as she's trying to claim now. I acknowledged my mistakes. I said it was my fault. I took responsibility. And then she said, you didn't acknowledge that I invited you to come stay with me, which is something she didn't even mention in her video. And I said, I didn't realize you wanted it to be that detailed, because here's the thing, I may never have written a public statement before, but I have read them. So I know that public statements usually are not about naming names and giving gritty details. I also never asked where this statement was going to be distributed. I don't know if it was just supposed to be the Discord or if she was going to want me to post it to social media as well. I never asked. But when she started nitpicking at it and she started wanting more details. The way she was saying things and the way she was throwing accusations and the way everything I tried to say was being twisted, yeah, I walked away. And I decided I didn't need to put up with that. I didn't need to deal with that. And I knew she was going to go public. I knew she was going to make a video about that, and I knew I couldn't stop her. At that point, I frankly didn't care anymore. And yes, unsurprisingly, I left the Discord at that point. It wasn't even running away. It was just being done with this. Then the video came out. And initially, I would have said that her accusations were correct, even if I didn't agree with the way she made everything sound so nefarious and villainous without any even consideration that this might have just been a mistake where I got into a situation that I didn't know how to handle. And even whenever I would talk to anyone about this situation, because there were a few people who I told, I said this was entirely my fault. And I told one person, this is my fault, but I'm not comfortable with what she's asking me to do to make up for it. Because once she started nitpicking at my statement, I started to feel like she wasn't asking for a statement. The word I used in our argument at the time was that she wanted a confession. What it really felt like was she wanted me to publicly humiliate myself. And that's still how I interpret that and how it looks to me. Again, you know what? I might be biased. I will acknowledge I am pretty biased in this whole thing. But it doesn't change the fact that, yeah, like I said, I was not comfortable with what she was asking me to do to make up for it. Because I think when you say that publicly humiliating yourself is the only way to save a friendship, I don't think there's much friendship left there to save. Because even if I had done it, there would have been no salvaging the friendship because I would have resented that. And why in the world would I stick around in her community and stick around in her Discord after she dragged my name through the mud like that? And let's talk about the money for a second, because that was something she made a very big deal about in her video. Just to be clear, I never asked if Two Women Talking was monetized. I never asked how much it made. I didn't feel like that was my place to ask because I felt like I was a guest on her channel and I was a guest in the podcast. Looking back, that wasn't my position, and I think I had a right to ask. When we did sponsored episodes, yes, I did get $60 for each of the sponsored series we did. I remember 3. There may have been 4. I don't think there were 5. So I made $180 to $240 off of that. After the first one, I thought she was charging more and she was taking a cut. That was an assumption on my part. But again, I didn't ask when I should have. One thing I will say is that earlier this year when her friend released a book, Liana came to me and asked me to do, at first it was supposed to be 2 pinups, then it turned into 3. I did not get paid for those. So I did 3 pieces of pinup art for her friend's book launch, which was used as bookmarks to promote the book, which is hundreds of dollars worth of art that I was not paid for. I never asked for payment. She did make a comment, a very non-committal comment, that she was going to see about getting, quote, our stuff published by the small publishing house that was handling that book. But it was never anything that was formalized. So the way she talks in her video where she makes it sound like I was the only person who benefited out of our relationship and she didn't get anything out of it. I suppose an argument could be made that the art was for her friend's book, so she technically didn't benefit off of that, but I still never would have done it for him. I did it because she asked me to. Something I will also add for context is that over the last couple years, there were a number of times where Liana would get into arguments with people and she would send me screenshots of these arguments, some of which would go on for days, and they were just walls of text. And I couldn't even read them all. It all started to bleed together. And when I would ask why she was still talking to this person and why she was wasting her time, she would say, gathering evidence. So yeah, when she started sending me walls of text messages with accusations and what feels now like argument baiting, Like she was trying to get me to respond with those walls of text and to get into a days-long argument like that. No, I didn't want to be involved in an argument like that because I knew there was no point. Because when you do an argument like that, you're not going to be able to reach an understanding. And there were a couple points where I did send walls of text because I was trying to respond. Honestly, I wish I had walked away from that conversation sooner. But yeah, I walked away when she made the really low blow of saying, oh, you're just worried about protecting your false reputation. Or are you afraid the truth will come out because you're still lying to your boyfriend? There's no way I could respond to that. So yeah, I stopped responding and I walked away. And she sent a few more messages after that. I didn't bother. I think that was one of the first times in my life that I actually stood up for myself. And I said that I wasn't going to take someone treating me that way. And during the fallout of the audiobook project, when I wasn't able to just come out and say that I didn't want to stop it, one of the comments she made was to remember that I was getting more support than most people did. That made me even more afraid to say that I didn't want to go forward with it because like I said at the time, I didn't want to look like I was taking advantage of people. Because I did understand that other people had put work into it. Around the same time, there was a situation where I had been in a group chat with her and several other people, and I tried to reach out to her a couple times to say that one person was making the group chat difficult to be in. And, I was told not to talk badly about that person behind their back. And eventually, because there was so much drama in the chat, I came to her and I said, hey, I'm thinking about leaving because I don't know that I'm a good fit for this group. Her response was, well, you should remember that everyone in that group bought a copy of your book. To which, looking back now, I wonder, what did that have anything to do with it? In our last argument, she talked about how, she came down on my boyfriend because she wasn't going to let a man treat her like that in her Discord. But, when a man in a group chat she oversaw was making me uncomfortable, that comment to me read like, well, you just have to sit and take it. And I still can't interpret that any other way when I look at it now. Just because someone paid for my book doesn't mean they're entitled to my time. And that group chat ended up closing down because of the way that man was talking to me. Because he insulted me, tried to deny it, but also doubled down. And when Two Women Talking first started, someone reached out to me, and I don't know if they meant it as a warning. I think it was just them mentioning something they had observed. But they warned me that she had a tendency to drop people as soon as they set a toe out of line. And, looking back, I wish I had listened to that warning. Because here we are. And, I still don't think that this needed to be public. I don't think it needed to be a giant video. To me, a public statement about the situation would have been saying that I broke her trust and she was no longer going to be associated with me, which, would have been her right, and I wouldn't have argued with it at the time. Now I'm arguing a bit because I'm looking back and realizing, yeah, I didn't lie about my boyfriend putting a stop to the project, because I never told her that he did. But she took his comment very personally, which she even admits. And that became a huge grudge against my boyfriend. And I don't think it should be some big shocker that I'm taking my boyfriend's side in this. I've known my boyfriend a lot longer, and we've been through a lot more than Liana and I have. But yeah, this was not the response I originally expected to make. But, she put out a video to her 26,000 subscribers, dragging my name through the mud and making me look like scum. And she said she shared screenshots of our argument with the mods on the Discord, none of whom reached out to me for my side of the story on any of it, which frankly doesn't even surprise me. I can't help but wonder if it crossed her mind that she could say all this because I have fewer than 250 subscribers at this point, and the odds of my response getting anywhere near the reach that hers did is very small. Anyway, I have to get ready to move, but I wanted this to be done before I move so that I can get this over with, and I can have a fresh start. You know what? Everyone is entitled to their opinion about me at this point. Some people might be willing to hear my side of the story. Some people won't. That's their right. But if you listened to this far, thank you for giving me a chance to give my side of events. And stay safe, take care, and maybe I'll see you all again soon.